Hello and welcome to Beyond the Words. My name is Bruno Combar. Today my guest is a Senior Localization Specialist within the Global Experience team at Qualtrics. She has a degree in Translation Studies and a Master's in Translation Technology from Dublin City University. Alex Góra, hello and welcome to Beyond the Words Localization Edition.
Super, thank you so much for having me.
Alex, looking at your profile, I found that you spent a year in Innsbruck, Erasmus year in Innsbruck. I did too, although for me it was in the last millennium, as much as I hate to admit it. How was it for you?
Oh, it was absolutely incredible. I loved every second of it. Admittedly, it was a completely different kind of educational system than in Ireland. I think in Innsbruck, you have to pass at 70%, and their 70% was like 110 in Ireland. So I really, really, like just put everything into that year. But aside from that, it was an incredible environment to be in, especially coming from, like you said, right, translation and localization. This was during my bachelor degree. I was doing Spanish and German at the time. So going to Innsbruck wasn't a popular choice amongst the German students, right? Because
Okay.
everybody was going off to Germany, and I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to go to Austria, do something different. And I have to say, it was an absolutely incredible experience, and I had a great time. I didn't do any skiing, which is controversial.
What a
Uh,
shame.
yeah, I was too scared. Anyone who came back just always had a broken bone of some sort. So I was like, no, I'll sit this one out. So yeah, but fantastic, fantastic year.
Yeah, I must admit I probably did a bit too much skiing rather than the studying while I was there. As a keen skier at the time, I really enjoyed that part of it. Did you find it easy to understand as well the local, the dialect, the Tyrolean dialect is very difficult to understand, but even like the local accent compared to like, what they speak in Germany and like Northern Germany, which is usually easier to understand for people who learn German.
Yeah, absolutely. So going over there, you kind of like straight away you're like just put into the deep end. So I had no problem kind of acclimatizing to like that, I suppose, dialect. And then I actually found that once I came back from my final year in DCU and my professor was German, I couldn't understand her. I was like, she's like so unclear.
Oh.
So actually came to it that the Tyrolean, I suppose, accent it did, was so much clearer to me after a year than German was.
That's excellent. And do they still close parties with that song Chiffon? I don't know if they still do that. Student parties.
Oh gosh, well, there was definitely student parties, but I'm not sure. Yeah, they do have a whole program in place, and like their Erasmus
Yeah,
students taken care of.
yeah.
But, oh my goodness, yeah, I
It
couldn't, I
was
couldn't tell you
it was
there.
probably more at my time, when they would close those parties with that. It's a song about a guy who is from Vienna and he goes skiing for the weekend. So, very much like a local theme. It's called Skifahren, and so from Skifahren, and they would close the party with that song, which was like, the first time I saw it, I was just like, I wasn't quite sure what was going on there, and then a couple of weeks later, I was joining in. So that's the adaptation to the culture. Wonderful. Now, diving more into your daily job, I saw that you were recently invited on a panel discussion about responsible AI, and then like in every area of the economy or business, everybody's talking about AI, and the translation world is not immune to that. Quite the opposite, in fact. And can you, well, I like the idea of responsible AI. So can you tell us a bit more about the risks of AI, maybe Gen AI in particular, and perhaps the solutions to those risks?
Absolutely. So I'd say it's very easy to be irresponsible with AI. So absolutely, I love taking part in the panel. It was a fantastic discussion, and honestly, like I looked or I was involved from, of course, the client side, right, and how are the clients using Gen AI for their localization needs, and in our case, especially, right, when you're working with be it customer data or your own company data, you have to be so careful with how you use it. And like to be completely like transparent with you, we're not actually comfortable in using Gen AI from a translation perspective. So of course, you know, we get such a massive push from leadership, right, to use AI. Like if you're not using AI, you're being left behind. But like we, as the localization team at Qualtrics, did push back and say, look, absolutely, we're very happy to onboard AI into our work streams and how we work. But when it comes to translation right now, we're gonna hold off on it if that's okay, right? And in our case, what we did was we have, you know, text IQ model machine learning models, and this is such a massive opportunity for, I suppose, localization, right? Because we have all these models, but they do need to be shared across into our markets. So how do we localize them? How do we localize them at speed and at quality? And the solution we brought in actually gave us like a 96% decrease in costs, which was just astounding, right? And that was
Mm.
use of, like, we still use machine translation. Our machine translation partners, which are, you know, fully vetted by Qualtrics, you know, from an information security perspective, and then also onboarded as a Qualtrics partner. But then we used Gen AI as a post translation step, as a like. I'm not going to say human, as a review. It was so natural for me to say human review, as a review step to the I suppose the review of the models. So that's how we used it. We're still quite shy about using it, and we're so aware of the risks. Like even recently, last week, I was in a meeting with leadership, and we used Gen AI to summarize our meeting. And
Mhm.
because, you know, English to English, Gen AI is mostly trained in English, right? And it still made mistakes. It still hallucinated. So if you like have this in English, which, like I said, it's fully trained in English, and it's still making mistakes, how can you assure that it's not making those mistakes in a language maybe you don't speak?
Yeah.
Um,
And you're right. You know, it's a lot about the data. Well, first of all, the risk. You know, the risk of data leaks, as you said. You know, because you know if you feed your proprietary data, sometimes even intellectual property,
yeah,
into a public model like like ChatGPT to name to name the most famous one, there's problems there, and even like feeding like uh, I suppose, which is internal information as well from a meeting, prompt injection attacks and these sort of things are very much a reality as well. That for people to get hold of some information, some proprietary information. So I find it quite scary for me. What I've seen from it as well in terms of quality, AI, there's not much in it with neural machine translation, and I think it's been probably a bit oversold as well by LSPs to their clients, and sometimes just rebranding what is actually neural machine translation and put AI in it, and then suddenly everybody listens, everybody listens to it. But and again, it's only as good as the data you feed it with. So.
yeah,
Um,
precise.
that's the limitation I find of AI. And well, I think we've touched on the apart from the risks, what you see the pros and cons are. You were talking about 96% cost reduction. You talk about, well, obviously speed as well. What are the cons of AI in translation, and perhaps from a wider perspective, machine translation, neural machine translation?
Yeah, so we don't, of course, naturally with our content, not everything is machine translated. We have content, you know, that's I would say okay or more accepted when it's machine translated, like for example, support content. But then naturally, you know, legal or marketing content doesn't go to machine translation, or in this case, it wouldn't go to AI at all. So we
Mhm.
are trying to find use cases where we can apply machine translation or AI. I hate to use them interchangeably. I know leadership, for example, is doing that constantly. To them, it's one and the same. I don't know to what extent do I just accept and say, yep, AI, I'm talking about AI, don't worry about it. But we're actually using machine translation, so we're
Yeah.
not impacting the business negatively. But that's a whole other conversation. So We are trying to find use cases, absolutely, because as I mentioned, if you're not onboarding AI, you will be left behind. So while it might not be, that we find content that we want to use it on, or definitely do some extensive testing internally to compare, for example, certain machine translation engines that we use versus the AI we have in-house as well. Um, Aside from that, we would like to onboard it into our processes, and this is definitely something that the team and I will be looking at over the next few quarters, and that's how to streamline our processes. Our team is small but very mighty at Qualtrics, but we're definitely at capacity. So anyway, where we can, take away the kind of manual handling, the manual hours from a job, then let's bring it in. I've noticed as well with a lot of tools now out there, translation technology wise, they're all selling AI as part of
Yeah.
their overall kind of offer, which is great, right? But we definitely need to, again, going back to the risks, see, okay, like, can I plug in my own AI? Because Qualtrics does have their own AI, where, or we're paying for a subscription with AI. So, our data isn't being leaked. Can we definitely plug that in, or are they offering their own? So there is definitely like a few kind of things that we need to keep an eye out for. But overall, it's definitely exciting. And there's definitely, in that case, you know, I suppose I keep talking about the pros, right? There's not a lot of cons that I'm seeing with it, aside from just, like I said, being careful from just a data perspective. And of course, if you are implementing it as a translation solution, then have that human touch as well, right? And that's
Yeah.
actually something we did implement with what I mentioned, the models, right? So we do have a fully automatic like a work stream in place. So it's machine translation and it's AI review. But for the models that need a little bit of an extra quality layer, we do a human review, be it just a spot check of 10 to 20 hours, but we do have it in place because
Mhm.
while, I think there needs to be a little bit of hand holding, like with a toddler at the beginning, to go back, see what the feedback is from our human reviewers, and then go back and feed that feedback into the AI so it can improve as it's going along. So we do have that in place. So we're trying to constantly, any cons that we do find, we try to, kind of find a solution to like, okay, so how can we improve the process?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the pros as well, which we didn't mention earlier, is probably that you can translate things that wouldn't get translated in the past. There would be so many companies where your tier one, tier two on the website would get translated, and then after that, everything would stay in English. So at least with AI, this is something you can do now. You can translate, and from an SEO perspective as well, that can be quite interesting for companies. So that increases the volume of things that a team can translate. And then, as you said, the resources are finite. Whether it's from a management perspective or from a translator perspective, and that's also an opportunity for translators on things that are reviewed by humans. As you said, you still need to go through that. It's also an opportunity for translators to get a share of that bigger pie as well, because more content gets translated. So it's not always a threat to translators anyway. That's the way I see it. Where do you see it going in the next, say, 5 years?
I think it's going to be fully enabled, fully kind of brought into processes, be it, be it tech companies, as well as, of course, translation vendors and localization teams within bigger organizations. I don't see it going away. I think we will make the most of it. By then, I definitely think it's going to be trained enough in other languages as well, be it with the help of, the localization industry reviewing all that content that's being translated by AI and being fed back into it. I think, 100% we're going to be using it in the future. And I totally agree with what you said. Like at the end of the day, machine translation came in, people were so worried about it taking jobs. I think this is going to take on basically create so many more jobs as well with it. Because as you said, there's going to be so much more content as well being localized. So 100%, I think it's going to be I think it will be a positive influence, and be it, once again, maybe taking a step back from the translation kind of industry, but overall, customers are going to have content in their language, which is kind of key for us at Qualtrics and any bigger organization.
Yeah. Perhaps the only doubts I have about that is that is the quality aspect of it, because what I can see as well, what I mentioned earlier is that AI is only as good as the data that feeds it, and then we can see that at the moment it is generating a lot of data with what all machine translation is, and again, we just like using it interchangeably as well, but then that data is fed back into it, and as you said, in certain languages, even in the major languages that let's say, European languages such as German or French or Spanish, Italian, that data is, first of all, is not as the corpus of data is not as large as the English data, and also if you feed AI generated or machine translation generated data with very light post editing back into the engine, it learns from its own data, and it feels a bit like a loop of fairly low quality. And even with machine learning, how does it improve?
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with you on that, but I do think that we technically have the same issue with machine translation as it is, right? Because a large problem with us and onboarding, a neural machine translation that we can train with our data was the fact that we do not have enough data to train it with. So we wouldn't have gotten the full efficiency and return on investment from onboarding such a tool. Because while we do human translate content, there isn't enough of it, because they usually do need a lot of segments to train a neural machine translation engine. So same will apply to AI as well. But one thing that we have found as well is, once again, our tier one languages, they get human translated, and we make sure that the content is of absolutely excellent quality. But as you kind of go down into tiering, a lot of customers, when it comes down to just say you want to cover those languages, they're happy when they see their language on the screen. They have quite a low threshold for quality, especially when you tell them, like, there's a banner on your website saying this content has been machine translated, or in this case, it has been translated with AI, and they will take that into account. So even when they see low quality on the page, if they're told that this was there is some sort of, banner saying, this is, basically automated translation, they will understand. And, the best thing you could get from it is feedback, right? Especially like Qualtrics is all about feedback. So if they just give you that feedback, oh, like, hey, this is, translated wrong, there is always a team internally to go and implement those changes. And that's how we work.
Yeah, you're right. There's a level of acceptance when you say, by the way, this was translated by a machine, and people have got much higher level of acceptance. Even like nowadays, when you go on a website and then there's a bot, a sort of chat bot, they used to pretend that it was humans, and obviously you could really tell very quickly that it wasn't. And people get quite cross, when that's the case, and then it's bad as well for the, in terms of the trust in the relationship with the company. I think companies realize that in the customer service area, they realize that very quickly. I saw that you've got experience as well, and it's like in a neighboring subject as well with captions and captioning software, both live and on demand. And what is your experience of that from a translation again, and probably from a subtitling perspective?
It's quite extensive, I'd say, at this point. Qualtrics loves a webinar, and they love a live event, so we tend to do a lot of them. And one of the things that really kind of became very apparent from my kind of, I suppose, start at Qualtrics was the fact that we have these live events. They're mostly in English. How do we make sure, how do we utilize them across our markets? And especially, EMEA and LAC for us, and then of course APJ. And without, I suppose, creating more costs of like recreating videos in those languages. And that's where need came for automated tools for especially for live events. So we have a lot of those, and it was so important for Qualtrics to bring in a tool that um, does the English, I suppose, transcription during, of course, the webinar, and then automatically translates it into our target languages. And again, this is all machine translation. Of course, there's tools out there that provide human transcription and human translation, but from a user perspective, it's not great because there's things happening on the screen and your subtitles are like coming on screen a minute later, and it's really bad user experience. And I would also say that it's the same, or it has been the same, with human voiceover. So actual live interpreters during the webinar has not proven to be a great experience. So while we know that there's absolutely markets out there that always prefer voiceovers to subtitles, we know that just from a user perspective, captions and machine translated captions are the best because they're instant, and we can enable glossaries or do not translate terms into them, which always increases the quality at least a little bit.
Yeah. I think again, there's a lot to do to improve there, and we've got a couple of clients, for example, they still use a bit of that for their events, but they've gone back to human subtitling as well, especially for key events. When you've got your CEO giving a keynote, you don't want the translation or the subtitling to be bad. It's really bad for the quality for the image of the company. And then even like for breakout sessions, when it gets a bit technical, if you've got a fast speaker or both, then you can see that the software gets a bit confused. It can't really condense. It doesn't have the capacity to condense. If the person is not really following a script either, and sometimes there's a bit of hesitation or repetition or these sort of things. The human brain still has that ability to just like condense as well, which we find when we've seen from the software, they can't really do it yet. And our a couple of clients came back and said, okay, this year for our main event, we're going to have human subtitling.
I agree completely. For example, like what I mentioned here was the use case of live events.
Yeah.
When it comes to, you see, sometimes those live events are, of course, recorded. And what we do when they're, say, put on the website for on-demand viewing, or they're evergreen on the website, we do partner up with our vendors, and we have them clean up those subtitles and the transcript. So it's always about, like, what you see on the screen in the live event is always going to be cleaned up once you see it on demand, because it is evergreen. And we do prefer, of course, make sure that there's higher quality there. So yeah, 100%. It's just, for the live part, when you're actually listening in, you just want it instant.
Yeah. Do you get, because that's, more our background, marketing, translation, transcreation. Do you get involved in transcreation yourself?
I do. I've had a few projects recently, and they've been an absolute pleasure to work on, I would say. No, well, you see, it's always fun to see something new. From my perspective, once again, I come from a more technical, background, and transcreation is very, I'd say, almost personal, right? So it is something completely new to me, and I've been working just on kind of the past two projects were transcreation, and there's a lot in it, especially from the point of view of, again, you want to make sure that it's not literal translation, which is something that I'm basically used to. And especially when you have, we have fantastic relationships with our vendors who provide transcreation services, and then you have internal reviews. right? And they're, like to what extent do you trust an internal review because this person knows the company the best, right? They know the brand voice, they know what it's supposed to sound like,
Yeah.
but they're not trained translators, are they? So the back and forth in transcreation projects, it's something that I would love to avoid, but I don't think it's something that we can in the near future.
Yeah, and there's a lot more space for opinions, and that's it. And that's our experience as well. We love working with stakeholders on the marketing side because, as you say, they know the product, they know the brand, they understand the importance of storytelling as well, and the emotional bit that goes into it. But sometimes it's quite difficult. But that's what makes it interesting as well, because it's the same as well when you work. And before going to the world of translation, transcreation, I was working for a marketing agency. And then when you do the copy in English, it's exactly the same as well. And so many people have an opinion on how it should sound like. You'll have the Markham person, you'll have the product manager, you'll have all sorts of people involved in the creation of the copy. And yeah, I suppose it's what makes it fun as well. But usually, looking at the end product is always good.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree. If you show it to five internal reviewers, you're going to get five different opinions. So, it's about which one
Exactly.
you implement.
Exactly. But hopefully sometimes they objectively agree on a certain, headline or something like that. I'm thinking, now this is good. This is what we want. And I guess that's the objective of all trans creators, to get to some sort of agreement.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, it's been really fascinating talking to you, Alex, and then the breadth of the experience as well from translation tech and transcreation and everything in between. Um, we Our final question is a question we ask all our guests, and most of our guests speak several languages, but we always ask them, if you were to learn a new language, which language would it be and why?
Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, I did French for a while in school, and I did, of course, German in school, and then I went on to study it, and I also took on Spanish, and then, of course, I'm a native Polish and English speaker, so I do have a few under my belt. I even learned Irish in school, but don't quote me on that. I'm honestly, what else could I bring in? I think something completely different, right? I think I'd go for like the likes of like Arabic, just to, not only like culturally, but also just because it's like a completely different language kind of family tree to what I know already. So definitely something, something more exotic than, just EMEA languages basically.
Yeah, I like the idea of that, and the and as you said, completely different structure. And today I was listening to in the car actually on the radio, a journalist that they were interviewing who was like a correspondent in the Middle East, and who spoke Arabic, and it was fluent in Arabic. And we have that sort of perception that it might be such a difficult language to learn. And he was saying how actually it was much easier than other languages, because it's very logical.
Oh yeah.
And it's a bit like, I don't know if you could compare it to German, but a lot of people thinking, oh gosh, German is so difficult. But no, German is very logical. It's once you understand how it works, it becomes a lot easier. You have to sort of go over that hill, and then suddenly it becomes a lot easier. And I have the feeling that Arabic could be a language like that. He was explaining much better than I do how what a logical language it is, and he was giving a few examples as well, of how logical it is. So I'm quite fascinated by Arabic as well, and yeah, I think that's a great choice.
Absolutely. Well, you've convinced me now. Off to Duolingo I go and start learning it.
Fantastic. That's a good idea. Wonderful. Alex, thank you very much for your time. It was a joy talking to you. And yeah, I hope we can have the opportunity to do that very soon again.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.